I'm gonna be real with you guys. This was not the video I want to make. I never asked for this. I was previously working on a longer project that had kind of stalled, so I recently decided to instead make a short video talking a little bit about my favorite game franchise. It was tentatively titled The Strange State of Deus Ex in 2025, in which I evaluated the state of the Deus Ex franchise on the year of its 25th anniversary, about a year and a half out from when I last did so, when the new game that was in development was unceremoniously cancelled by Embracer Group and sent the fan community into a downward spiral of depression and hopelessness. Since then, there have been reports of developer Eidos-Montreal attempting, but sadly failing, to pitch a different Deus Ex title to publishers, and instead, most of their work lately seems to consist of assisting other developers with bigger projects, namely the Xbox Game Studios published Grounded 2 and Fable. Despite the bleak outlook for the series' future, I was actually prepared to take an optimistic tone, as this year saw the return of two Deus Ex titles that were previously thought long gone: the mobile spin-off Deus Ex Go, and the PS2 port of the original game called Deus Ex The Conspiracy onto modern PlayStation platforms. Believe it or not, this actually makes 2025 the year with the most Deus Ex releases since 2017, even if they're technically just two re-releases. This is where the bar is at, but hey, after the previous standard was nothing, I'll take what I can get. The news that Eidos-Montreal was still trying to get a new title off the ground was also reason for hope in my opinion, as despite their troubles acquiring a publisher, the fact that they were still trying at all, even in the face of the previous game's cancellation and 2 rounds of massive layoffs, was genuinely encouraging, and convinced me that they were still determined to make Deus Ex work. Even with an uncertain future, I felt like the franchise was still in good hands, at least when it comes to its primary developer. The publisher can eat a bag of dicks as far as I care. But then State of Play happened, and I realized immediately that I had to take my entire script that I wrote and just throw it out the window. Because now I have to turn my full focus towards Deus Ex Remastered.
Gods.
Yes, that's right. In an announcement that surprised everyone, the original Deus Ex is finally getting an official remaster after years of fan requests. This marks the first new, non-re-release content the Deus Ex franchise has seen since Mankind Divided's final DLC, even if it is a remaster of the first game. This should be a slam dunk with fans who have been craving new content desperately for almost a decade, with many requests for this exact thing. But looking at online reception to the remaster's trailers, sentiments seem to be more negative than anything. Why is that? I mean, it couldn't possibly be that bad, right?
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
That makes me one ugly son of a bitch.
Jesus Christ, Denton. Where do I even begin with this? I guess I'll start with the obvious. This remaster looks absolutely hideous. It looks worse than Invisible War, which I honestly don't even think looks that bad for its time, but the point is that it doesn't look like the graphical quality has advanced beyond that which you might find in the mid-2000s. The character models look particularly ugly. They all have this weird sheen to them that makes them look like they're made out of plastic. And the faces, oh god. Why are the animations so stiff? It's like I'm watching the intro to SpongeBob.
Are ya ready, kids?
JC and Paul both look like they're 50, even though they're supposed to be respectively in their 20s and 30s at this point. Again, we've seen what the Denton brothers look like in Invisible War, and they looked better in that game. Hell, the HD models in the free mod Project HDTP look better than this official remaster, and I don't even particularly like those either. Leo Gold looks like he's seen a little too much terror and wants to be sent back to the people in a body bag.
That's over the line.
And why does Gary Savage look like Walter White now? Character models are definitely the biggest visual problem DX Remastered has, but it's far from the only one. The lighting has been completely changed, and environments look way darker than they ever were in the original, which completely neuters the intended atmosphere. Even in the screenshots they chose to show off, there are a ton of crushed blacks from the high contrast that do not do the game any favors.
We're 100% black.
At the same time, surfaces are also much more reflective, I guess to show off those fancy lighting effects. There's evidence of AI texture upscaling, as people noticed misspelled words in the background of some shots, but even in the comparisons they showed off themselves, it's clear that they didn't even upscale all of them. And speaking of shit they didn't bother to update, the explosion effects are exactly the same as in the original game. The FOV they chose exposed how bad the textures and animations of JC's arms look. I mean, the gun doesn't even have a muzzle flash, come on! How do you miss that? Even the poster for the game has been accused of potentially being AI generated, and though I haven't seen super convincing arguments for that, it wouldn't surprise me given the obvious AI upscaling. That's not even to mention more minor stuff, like the UI looking way more soulless while also not being scaled correctly in the trailer. It's utterly baffling that the developers not only got the look so wrong, but didn't realize there was any issue with it and just released the trailer and screenshots as they were. Are they blind? Cheap? Or just lazy? Reception to this reveal has been absolutely brutal, with a lot of people directly comparing the way it looks to that of Grand Theft Auto: The Definitive Trilogy, which is widely considered to be one of the worst remasters in the history of modern gaming. I've also seen comparisons to Roblox, Doom 3, and an indie dev's first project in Unity. Considering how it looks, people are also making fun of how ridiculous the system requirements seem to be, which recommend specs that are higher than that of Mankind Divided, which is far and away the nicest looking game in the series. And this remaster is priced at $30! A lot of the criticism is centered around the primary developer, Aspyr, who have a fairly mixed reputation when it comes to remaster jobs. Some of them, like the ones for Tomb Raider and Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, have been received pretty well overall, while others are absolutely loathed, like the Battlefront Classic Collection. They also face controversy over using AI for Lara Croft's French voice actress in one of those remasters, which sucks. I haven't played any of their games, so I can't comment based on personal experience, but regardless, I'm not the biggest fan of giving the job of remastering one of the best games ever made to a studio with a hit or miss reputation. Some commenters have even said that they want a remake rather than a remaster, and while I sympathize, I don't think those people are living in reality. Eidos-Montreal can't get an original game off the ground right now. Do you really think they'd get the money for a remake? And even if they did, would you trust them given this fiasco we currently have? A lot of people have been saying that this remaster should have been given to Night Dive Studios instead, and I agree. They've built up a reputation of being the remastering masters, bringing dead games back to life and enhancing them with modern features. They're also clearly huge immersive sim fans, as they bought the rights to the System Shock franchise and re-released these previously unavailable games while touching up the original versions. Then they proceeded to create an enhanced version of the first game, then a full-on remake of the first game, and they just released System Shock 2's official remaster earlier this year to very positive reception. They would have been a shoo-in for this job, and many of their developers expressed interest in working on Deus Ex, but since Aspyr is owned by the same parent company as Eidos, they were the cheaper option over hiring outside help. That makes sense, I suppose, but it still doesn't mean I or anyone else have to be happy about it. I mean, Bethesda dished out the money for Night Dive to clean up Quake 1 and 2, Doom 1 and 2 and 64, and Heretic and Hexen, and those versions of the games are widely beloved, so there is precedent. It could have been done. I've really been trying to withhold some judgment for Deus Ex Remastered until after it releases and we see what's in it beyond what's been advertised, but the thing about a remaster is that the bar for success is considerably lower than that of a full remake or even an original game. At bare minimum, in my opinion, a remaster needs to update the visuals, modernize controls, and make sure the game is stable and easily playable on modern hardware. And when one of those key pillars that's lacking makes itself obvious even before the game comes out, it becomes harder to believe that the overall product is good if they can't even get the basics right. Even ignoring the visuals and looking at other features as they're listed, there's nothing to suggest that buying the remaster will provide that much better of an experience than the original, which is available for far cheaper. Features like improved load times and increased resolution with ultrawide support are great and all, but those are also things that can easily be achieved through modding the original game. Sure, the remaster does have some unique features like full controller support, achievements, and ragdoll physics? That'll be interesting.
Analyzing system damage.
And it is great that Deus Ex is finally playable on modern consoles, though I do think it's unfortunate that this will be the way some players experience the game for the first time. But if you're on PC, it's a much harder sell. In fact, Deus Ex The Conspiracy released just a few months ago on PS4 and 5, for free on PS Plus Premium or $15 individually, which further undermines incentive to buy the remaster for those systems. Personally, I still think $15 is too much for what's widely considered an inferior port job, but it's still a better deal than the remaster. Deus Ex Game of the Year Edition is normally $7 and goes on sale for less than $1 all the time. In fact, as I write this, the entire Deus Ex series on Steam can be purchased for less than $10, which is an incredible deal. And while the original game hasn't been very well maintained by its owners, there's a plethora of mods easily available to download for free from dedicated community members with the intent of fixing, improving, or otherwise rebalancing the game. With this option in mind, why would PC players dish out $30 for a game that looks way worse? Yes, that is the same price as the Tomb Raider and Legacy of Kain remasters, but each of those at least had more than one game in them, not to mention the obvious fact that their graphical upgrades didn't look absolutely horrendous. I guess fans of the original could be more convinced to buy Deus Ex Remastered if it had the ability to switch between the older graphics and new ones, which was a feature in Tomb Raider and Legacy of Kain. But right now, we don't know if that's available, and even if it is, it's not exactly a selling point that you have the ability to turn off the new graphics that the game is selling you on in the first place, because those new graphics are so unbearably ugly. At this point, I think it's fair to say that the backlash over Deus Ex Remastered's quality has overshadowed any excitement that might have been generated by its announcement. Negative discussion about it is all over YouTube, Reddit, the website formerly known as Twitter, and Steam forums, and most of the articles written about the remaster on gaming journalism websites are commenting on its apparent lack of quality and the negative response to that. Side note, why write articles with titles like this? Are you so desperate for clicks that you'll reduce Deus Ex's entire legacy to Elon Musk's favorite game? How embarrassing. Do better, Kotaku. Anyway, my point is that I think it's fairly reasonable to assume that Eidos-Montreal and Aspyr aren't unaware of the reception their trailers and screenshots got, and they have a few choices in front of them in terms of what to do next. My cynical assumption is that they'll carry on as if none of it is happening and just release the remaster as is in February of next year. That is the path of least resistance, so I'm inclined to think that's what they'll do. However, if this backlash is intense enough to convince them that might cost sales, then perhaps they'll go back to the game and at least try to alter some of the graphics, and release another, better trailer in an effort to win fans back. Kind of like the Sonic movie situation, though in that case it was just one animated character, not the content of an entire video game.
Meow?
Which is my way of saying that I wouldn't count on them going back and fixing things, especially since the release date is only 4 months away. They already put in this little effort to begin with, why would that change now? Unless they delay the game, but I think that's the least likely scenario of all, short of them just canceling it altogether. Look, to be honest, in a vacuum, a single bad remaster of an old classic game isn't that big of a deal. Sad as it is to say, it happens all the time, especially nowadays. So long as the original version of the game is still legally available to purchase and play, it's easy enough to just ignore the new release and keep enjoying the game you love. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have bothered making a video about Deus Ex Remastered before it even came out. But there are two big reasons why I felt this video was necessary. One, it's Deus Ex, one of my favorite games of all time and my favorite game series of all time. It's something that I'm naturally very passionate about. But two, and this is more pertinent, this will be the first new content from the Deus Ex series in 9 years, and because of that, it's imperative for the series' future that the remaster does well. The series has been on ice for almost a decade, through game cancellations, layoffs, and a general sense of apathy from publishers who don't value Deus Ex as an IP and are treating it so poorly, and this is yet another extension of that. After canceling a new game last year, one that was 2 years into development I might add, Deus Ex's big comeback is this cheap, lazy shit? It's just so insulting to the fan community who have been begging for anything Deus Ex when it seemed that all hope for new content was lost. But that's not even the worst part about all of this, because now fans are faced with an impossible dilemma about whether or not to support Deus Ex Remastered. Understandably, there are a lot of people making the argument that we should be buying this game regardless of its apparent lack of quality, in order to support the franchise and show that there's still a market for it, in the hopes that more content for it will be produced in the future. But this argument has been countered by pointing out that rewarding this terrible slop will just result in the publisher believing this level of effort is okay and continuing to produce more slop. And honestly, I can see both sides' perspectives, and I don't know what the right choice is. I'm still personally undecided about whether or not I want to buy Deus Ex Remastered myself, though the possibility of reviewing it for my channel is a factor that plays into my decision. If the remaster flops, will the publisher realize that's because they put in the bare minimum effort? Or will they default to the easy belief that consumers simply aren't interested in Deus Ex? Don't answer that, I already know. I'm just so disappointed and annoyed that we've been put in this position at all. This didn't need to happen. Had the remaster been given to Night Dive, or even if Aspyr put in a little more time and effort, this could have gone over very differently. But once again, corporate greed won out and took the cheapest route possible, and I bet it won't pay off for them, which will ultimately hurt us, the consumers who want more Deus Ex just with effort put into it. I've said it before, if you're familiar with the themes of the series, it's very ironic that this keeps happening to Deus Ex in particular. This franchise needs a win so badly. Going back to something I mentioned at the beginning of the video, in the previous script I had been writing, I talked a bit about Eidos-Montreal and how I felt the series was in good hands when it came to their primary developer. I was prepared to say that with confidence before the remaster was announced, and now I'm not so sure. Because how could they have looked at this and thought it was okay to show off or indeed release, especially if they supposedly worked with Aspyr on it? Now granted, I am willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Aspyr is still the main developer of the remaster, and I don't know exactly how much input Eidos-Montreal had in their creative process, or whether they had any input in releasing this at all. For all I know, this was a mandate by the Embracer bosses and they had no say in the matter, and Eidos-Montreal's name was put on the product to grant it legitimacy, like with Crystal Dynamics and the Tomb Raider remasters. Even though in both cases the original developer was a different company that had been long dead, but that's besides the point. All the same, this seriously damages trust between the developers and consumers, and that's something they can't afford if they want to bring the Deus Ex brand back and have it be successful, which it seems they do. but we may never get that if the publisher continues getting in its way. There's something that's concerning me about how the less popular franchises owned by Embracer are being treated, particularly Deus Ex and Thief, which are both under the ownership of Eidos-Montreal. In case you missed it, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, a new Thief game was announced at Summer Game Fest a few months ago, marking the first new entry in the series since the 2014 reboot. However, it's a VR-only title, and instead of being developed by Eidos-Montreal, it's made by Maze Theory and published by Vertigo Games. Much like Deus Ex Remastered, it's an outsourced project involving one of Eidos-Montreal's IPs to a different studio in order to produce what appears to be a cheaper game than the main studio's AAA offerings. Now, that's not to suggest that Thief VR won't be good. I actually think it looks very promising, and about 1,000,000 times better than Deus Ex Remastered. However, I can't help but feel like these games are being set up to fail. VR is already a very limited market, and enthusiasm for Deus Ex Remastered has been severely damaged, maybe irreparably. Even in the best case scenarios, I can't imagine either of these titles making a ton of money, kickstarting a vicious cycle where the publisher underinvests in these IPs, they fail financially, and either the franchise is put on ice again or their next entry is given even less investment. It's not like there isn't precedent for that happening in both of these series' recent history. I don't know, I just wish they cared more is all. A lot of people talk about how much love and effort Night Dive puts into their remasters, but something that isn't mentioned as often is that they do the same with their regular releases. Every single old game they've bought the rights to and re-released is touched up at least a little, so that they're playable on modern systems without the need for extensive modding. Oftentimes, these updates are free for those who already own the game, such as the case with the Bethesda re-releases. No, they are not perfect, and sometimes they make anti-consumer business decisions, but I've never gotten the impression from them that they value shareholders or their bottom line more than players. Older games owned by the Eidos Corporation, like Deus Ex, Thief, Tomb Raider, and Legacy of Kain could have at least gotten the amount of effort required to ensure their playability out of the box. But instead, we're being sold $30 remasters that typically offer minor improvements at best, and are actively to the detriment of the game's quality at worst. It's just sad. But that's the game industry for you. Coming back to the subject of this video, I'm not going to tell you whether or not you should spend your money on this thing. If Deus Ex Remastered genuinely is of interest to you, or you want to buy it to support the Deus Ex franchise, or you want to play the original game on console, or you're just curious, that's great and I wouldn't want to take that away from you. I won't make a determination on whether it's worth the money until I play it myself. But with that said, if you haven't played the original game, I still absolutely recommend it, especially with how cheap it still is. Yes, it does require some modding in order to run properly, but that's no additional cost and it's pretty easy. For a vanilla experience that also stabilizes the game, I highly recommend Deus Ex, also known as Kenty's Launcher, a replacement executable for Deus Ex that includes a variety of options and features to customize and optimize your play experience, including a mod manager. For visual enhancements, I recommend the New Vision mod, which updates textures to HD while preserving the art style to make the whole thing nicer on the eyes. While I don't particularly care for it, you could also install Project HDTP to have more detailed character models, at least for major characters. If you want something more comprehensive but also easily accessible, the Revision mod is free to download on Steam and GOG if you own the original. The changes it makes to Deus Ex are extensive, including altering the maps, remixing the soundtrack, and adding achievements, but it's also very customizable, and most of the additions can be disabled while providing a more stable experience. It is very different from the original game though, so I don't recommend it for a first playthrough. If that's not your style, the GMDX mod adds a lot of mechanical overhauls to the game, improving the AI, expanding player abilities, and rebalancing the game overall. Again, play this only after you've played the vanilla game once because these changes are so significant as to offer you a different experience. It was recently added to GOG's one-click install mod collection, but if you're on Steam, it's also available on ModDB. All of these are great alternatives to buying Deus Ex Remastered, and I'll link them in the description. I'll also note that a fair few people are worried that the original game will be delisted after the remaster comes out, and that's an understandable fear, but I personally don't think it will happen. It doesn't seem to be Aspyr's MO to replace older copies of the games they remaster, with the only exception being the first Soul Reaver on Steam, but that appears to have been removed back when Square Enix owned it, before the remaster even came out. However, what they tend to do after releasing a remaster is no longer discount the original game, I assume in an attempt to get you to buy the new version, which is annoying to be sure. All the more reason to get the original Deus Ex now, I guess. So yeah, that about summarizes the shit show that is Deus Ex Remastered and all the controversy surrounding it. I do still feel demoralized about the direction that the franchise is going in, but all I can do at this point is hope that it bounces back somehow. The one silver lining that I've experienced, at least, is that the memes and jokes about this release are pretty damn good. Nice to see the Deus Ex subreddit being inspired to create again, even if it's because of less than ideal circumstances. Still, I'll try to keep an open mind until the release date. But seriously, Aspyr, stay the fuck away from Thief. Give those games to Night Dive. They prove they know how to work in the Dark Engine, let them cook. For now though, all I can say is, what a shame. It was a good game. What a rotten way to get remastered.
Don't believe me? It's all in the numbers.